nation, one election bill could be introduced by the government in the current winter session, or it could be in the next session. But here's what we're hearing. The government foresees that this bill may be sent to a joint parliamentary committee for detailed discussion, much like the Waqf Amendment Bill, in which case the whole process, of course, is a lengthy one, could take time. The Cabinet has already approved the report of the Ram Nath Kovind Committee on One Nation, One Election. So the government wants to push forward with it, wants a consensus to be reached on the bill. So we are hearing from our sources that it could be brought up in the winter session itself, so that even if it goes to a JPC, to a joint parliamentary committee for further scrutiny, for further discussion, that can start. The process can start right away, and you could see One Nation, One Election becoming a reality sooner rather than really later. Now, this is the information we're picking up right now. Remember that a JPC will have representatives of all political parties, so thereby the government hopes that with a JPC there will be a discussion and consensus that will be reached. Piyush Mishra is joining us live with more details on this. Piyush, what are you picking up from your sources? What are the chances of this bill being brought in this very session, in the winter session?
Well, what sources are telling us, Akshata, is that either in this session or in next session, the government is likely to introduce this bill in Parliament. Remember that the committee, One Nation, One Poll committee, which was led by former President Ram Nath Kovind, had already submitted its report, and the Cabinet had cleared the report. Now, when this report has been cleared, we can expect the government to table this bill. Remember that the Ram Nath Kovind committee had sought responses from various political parties, and maximum of them had supported the notion of One Nation, One Poll. Now, what we're also learning from our sources is that after tabling this bill on the floor of the House, this bill could be referred to Joint Parliamentary Committee, where the suggestions of various stakeholders are likely to be taken by the Joint Parliamentary Committee, and speakers, intellectuals, and many other people likely to be called in before JPC, where the JPC is going to seek their suggestions. So most likely it's going to be in this session or in next session, but certainly it's going to be a lengthy process. But everything will be clear only after the bill is tabled in Parliament. Remember that in Waqf Amendment Act also we are seeing how the JPC is taking views of various
Exactly, and it's taking time, which is why perhaps the government wants to push forward in this very session and then ensure that whatever consultations, discussions need to happen with the JPC, that's also moved forward. Remember that this is something that the government has been on a mission on. One Nation, One Election. Prime Minister Modi had spoken about this also earlier this year. Listen in to what the Prime Minister had to say.
देश ने बार बार चुनाव इस देश की प्रगति में रुकावट बन रहे हैं, गतिरोध पैदा कर रहे हैं. आज कोई भी योजना को चुनाव के साथ जोड़ देना आसान हो गया है, क्योंकि हर 3 महीने 6 महीने कहीं न कहीं चुनाव चल रहा है. कोई भी योजना जाहिर करोगे आप तो मीडिया में देखेंगे चुनाव आया तो फलाना हो गया, चुनाव आया तो फलाना हो गया. हर काम को चुनाव के रंग से रंग दिया गया है, और इसलिए देश में व्यापक चर्चा हुई है. सभी राजनीतिक दलों ने अपने विचार रखे हैं. एक कमेटी ने बहुत बढ़िया अपना रिपोर्ट तैयार किया है. वन नेशन वन इलेक्शन के लिए देश को आगे आना होगा.
Now, I'm sure all of you are wondering, what exactly is the One Nation, One Election proposal? How does it work? How can you have the entire country going into elections at one point in time? Well, it rests really on one crucial pivot, which is the possibility of improved governance. And that's what the message of Prime Minister Modi has constantly been about One Nation, One Election, ensuring efficiency. We explained to you all the details you need to know about how One Nation, One Election actually works.
What exactly is One Nation, One Election? To break it down for you, the concept here refers to holding simultaneous polls across the country. In fact, the proposal is to conduct elections for Lok Sabha as well as the state assemblies all at the same time. In India, the general elections to elect the members of parliament and state assembly polls are all held separately when the tenure of the incumbent government comes to an end or when it gets dissolved for some reason. Now, the concept, however, does not encompass panchayat elections or state municipality elections and by-election. Notably, One Nation, One Election concept is certainly not new. It was already in practice until 1967. In fact, India has held simultaneous polls even before. General elections and elections to the state assemblies were held together in 1952, in 1957, in 1962 and in 1967. The inception of this concept. In 1983, the Election Commission of India, the ECI, had suggested simultaneous elections. In 2003, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee took up the matter with the Congress President Sonia Gandhi. However, there wasn't much headway there. Then later in 2010, L.K. Advani said that he had already discussed the matter with Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. And over the years, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been the one advocating and pushing for this idea of simultaneous Lok Sabha and state assembly polls. It was also one of the components of the BJP's election manifesto for 2014 Lok Sabha elections. Now, the pros and cons to it. Supporters of the one nation, one election often underline that once implemented, it would bring down the overall expenditure on the electoral process. As per reports, a whopping 60,000 crores was spent on the previous 2019 Lok Sabha elections. Now, simultaneous elections is also likely to boost voter turnout, making it quite convenient for the electorate to cast ballot at once. Another argument here favoring the simultaneous polls concept is that it will lead to a more efficient administration. During elections, the entire state machinery focuses on conducting a free and fair electoral process, which finally impacts the everyday administration because officials are, of course, engaged in polling duties. Now, the idea of one nation, one election is expected to bring consistency and continuity in policies as well as programs of the government. Now, the cons to it. This exercise is easier said than done. Holding just one mega election would be too complex an exercise in a huge and a diverse country like ours, India. The biggest challenge, of course, in the way of the one nation, one election is to sync the terms of the various state assemblies with those of Lok Sabha. The plan raises, of course, serious questions here. What would happen if the central or state government collapses mid-tenure? Would elections be held again in every state, or will there be precedence rule that will be imposed? The idea of one nation, one election does not square with the concept of federalism, as it is established on the notion that the entire nation is one, contradicting the content of Article 1, which envisages India as a union of states. Additionally, there is worry that regional issues might just get overshadowed. It may be just sidelined by national issues affecting the electoral outcome at the state level. Also, regional parties would in fact not be able to compete hard enough with national parties when it comes to election expenditure and strategy. A 2015 study by the IDFC Institute found a 77% chance that the winning political parties or alliance will win both the Lok Sabha and the assembly elections in the state when held together. Constitutional amendments. The Constitution also fundamentally does not allow simultaneous polls. 5 articles in the Constitution and the Representation of People's Act 1951 would have to be amended, and for this, every recognized state and national party would have to agree to this very change. For a constitutional amendment, 2/3 members of the House must be present for vote. A consensus of all political parties and state governments is, of course, needed. After the constitutional amendment bill is passed in the Parliament, it then needs to be ratified by half the states in India through resolutions in their very assemblies.